Hey guys, Jobin here, and this is my Spyderco collection. We've got the little Kiwi, which was a gift to me from Pavlov, Sandor, and Tripod here on YouTube. Very sweet little blade. And a lot more practical than it looks, by the way. Get a nice secure grip on this thing. Very interesting little piece. Got the Delica 4. Mine's the blue one, obviously. Got the Paramilitary 2, which I just did a video on, so I won't say too much about that. Other than that, it's a fantastic knife. And the Manix 2. This is one of the sprint runs. And this is... I originally had the standard model, but this is kind of what made me fall a bit in love with Spyderco in general, is this knife. And it's the reason I ended up buying more. And this is the new guy, a Superleaf. Now you might immediately notice that it is spectacularly similar to the Manix 2. Seriously, these things are like 95% the same. Let's free up a little space here. Now, back when I was first getting a little bit into somewhat higher-end knives, the Manix 2, the Superleaf, and the Para were three of the main knives I was looking at, and I eventually settled on the Manix, but found myself looking wistfully at the Superleaf occasionally. And recently, when I found that this model had been discontinued and was available at a reduced price, about $20 less, I believe, than what it was generally going for a few years ago, I bought one on impulse. And I knew it was very, very similar to the Manix, but I wasn't quite prepared for how nearly identical they were. And so I may not end up keeping both of them, because I can't really afford to. Knives like this are an expensive hobby, and while I can very well afford to have multiples of, say, a knife like this, which costs significantly less than $20 retail, and I get them wholesale, Spydercos are another matter. And when I have ones that are this close, one of them's probably going to find a new home, so I can afford to get something that's actually different. Because, like I said, they are very, very similar. The biggest difference you're going to see is in the handle here. There's different curves, to be sure, particularly on the inside here where your fingers go. But the overall feel is actually very similar, and you have a very similar shape with the big choil there, and then a projection there, and then it slopes back in. And another little bit of a projection, more or less, near the hilt. The blades are very, very similar. This is a full flat ground sprint run Manix, so the standard model, the one in 154 cm, has a hollow grind, so there would be a little bit more difference in the blades there. But at least between these two models, they're very, very similar. The tip on the Superleaf is dropped a little bit further down, and the blade overall has a little more sweepability to it. Here, I think I can show that. Like that. I'm sorry, it's not dropped further down, it's the other way around. The more symmetrical Manix blade actually puts the tip a little lower, whereas the sweep of the Superleaf puts it a little higher. In hand, they feel very, very similar. In a way, having them both now, I'm almost not surprised that Spyderco is discontinuing the Superleaf, because there's just so much redundancy here. And if the Manix is more popular and you aren't selling as many of these, why bother? The blade on the Superleaf is a little bit thicker stock. Not much, but a little. A millimeter or so. They of course have different locking mechanisms and different pocket clips. Here we have the Superleaf with a wire clip, which is reversible to the other side. It also has a compression lock, unlike the ball bearing lock. I find this compression lock a little less convenient to use than, for example, the one on the Paramilitary 2. And let's go in here and show you the difference between them. The access cutout on the Superleaf is smaller and squarer, whereas with the Para 2 they just took out this sort of very well rounded area. It gives you a lot of room to get in there with your thumb or your finger, excuse me, however you choose to do it. This one, it's a little more effort because with the smaller area of access, it's harder to use the side or much of the meat of your finger or thumb. You have to kind of get in there with the tip, which is a little uncomfortable. Not horrible, just a little bit. Don't quote me on this, but I would expect that at least the Paramilitary 2 came out after the Superleaf, and this is a design refinement. The Superleaf is very, very smooth. Once I got past the out-of-the-box stiffness, which is kind of standard with a lot of knives, there's almost nothing to feel when opening and closing it. Any minor tug you feel is probably from the detent on the lock sliding against the blade, not anything from the pivot or the pivot washers, which by the way appear to be nylon, so I should hope it would be smooth. Many people, including myself, somewhat prefer phosphor bronze, but if there's one thing good quality nylon does well, it's be absurdly smooth. Probably smoother than all or most of those newfangled systems with all the little ball bearings in them. Overall, I think if it interests you, you should probably pick one up now, because like I said, they'll be discontinued soon. However, if you already have a Manix 2, you might want to think twice, because they are just so similar. It's extremely minor differences between them. I will say, if you have a Manix and you almost love it, but maybe the grip isn't quite right for you, maybe still pick up a Superleaf, or vice versa, because there are subtle differences and they have a very slightly different feel in hand. So, I think that's about all I have to say about it, having only owned it for a couple of days. I hope you enjoyed this look at the Spyderco Superleaf and friends. This is Jobin signing off saying, remember where your knife is.